The winter wind cut through the dusty backyard of Harlan's horse trading post like a rusted blade. December in this forgotten corner of Wyoming territory showed no mercy, not to the horses stamping in their stalls, not to the men haggling over prices, and certainly not to the woman shackled beside the water trough. She sat motionless on the frozen ground, her wrists bound by iron cuffs chained to the wooden post. Her dress, once blue calico, hung in tatters around her thin frame. Mud caked the hem, and the sleeves were torn at the shoulders. But it was her stillness that drew stares from the passing traders, not the stillness of defeat, but of someone conserving strength for battles yet to come. $5 for the night, Harlan bellowed from the porch, his voice carrying over the wind. Clean enough, strong enough, and she don't talk back none. The woman didn't flinch. Her eyes, gray as winter sky, stayed fixed on the horizon beyond the trading post's fence. Ice had formed in the water trough beside her, but she made no move toward it, though her lips were cracked from thirst. A group of cowhands lounged against the corral fence, passing a bottle between them. One spat tobacco juice near her feet. Harlan, where'd you get this one? Came with Prescott this morning, Harlan replied, waving a stained piece of paper. Got the deed right here, legal as Sunday. Her man owed him gambling debts, signed her over fair and square. The woman's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the only sign she'd heard. She got a name, another man called out. Don't matter what her name is, Harlan snapped. You pay. You call her whatever you like. The afternoon wore on. Men came and went, some pausing to look, others averting their eyes. The woman remained still as stone, though the temperature continued to drop. Frost began forming on the chains. Then came the sound of hooves, steady, unhurried. A lone rider approached from the north road, his horse's breath clouding in the cold air. The man sat tall in the saddle, his weather-beaten leather coat pulled tight against the wind. A week's worth of dust covered his clothes, and his wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face. He guided his horse to the hitching post, dismounted with practiced ease, and stood for a moment, taking in the scene. His gaze swept across the yard, the traders, the horses, the woman by the trough. He was older than most cowhands, maybe 35, with the kind of quiet presence that made other men step aside without being asked. That's Eli Cutter, someone whispered. Runs cattle up near Devil's Creek. Eli walked toward the trading post's entrance, his spurs ringing softly with each step. But as he passed the water trough, he stopped. The woman hadn't looked up, hadn't acknowledged his presence, but something in her stillness held him there. She's $5, Harlan called from the porch, mistaking Eli's pause for interest. Worth every penny, I guarantee. Got all the papers right here if you want to see 'em. Eli's eyes moved from the woman to Harlan, then back again. The wind picked up, rattling the loose boards of the trading post. For the whole night, Harlan continued, sensing a potential sale. Or we can work out a weekly rate if you're planning to stay in town. The woman's fingers, blue with cold, curled slightly against her palms. Still, she didn't look up. Eli reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch, without counting. He walked to the porch and set it on the barrel beside Harlan. The weight of it made a solid thud. That's more than $5, Harlan said, his eyes gleaming as he hefted the pouch. It is, Eli agreed. You want her for the week then, the month? Tonight, Eli said quietly, and you'll unchain her now. Something in his tone made Harlan's smile falter. The other men around the yard had gone silent, watching. Sure. Harlan fumbled for the keys at his belt. Just doing business, you understand. Nothing personal. Eli didn't respond. He walked back to the trough as Harlan hurried after him, keys jangling. The woman finally looked up as Harlan knelt to unlock the shackles. Her eyes met Eli's for just a moment, gray meeting brown, before she looked away again. The chains fell away with a metallic clatter. Red marks circled her wrists where the iron had rubbed the skin raw. She flexed her fingers slowly, working feeling back into them. "Come on then," Harlan said, reaching for her arm. "Customers waiting." "Don't." Eli's voice was calm, but carried an edge that made Harlan step back. "She'll stand when she's ready." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then, slowly, the woman placed her hands on the ground and pushed herself up. Her legs shook from cold and stillness, but she stood straight, chin lifted. She was taller than expected, nearly as tall as some of the men watching. Eli turned and walked toward his horse. After a moment's hesitation, the woman followed. Her bare feet made no sound on the frozen ground. When they reached his mount, he untied a blanket from behind the saddle and held it out to her. She took it without a word, wrapping it around her shoulders. "You riding with me or walking?" he asked. She looked at the horse, then at him. "I can walk." It was the first time anyone had heard her speak. Her voice was hoarse but steady, carrying a hint of an accent, maybe Carolina, maybe Virginia. "It's 3 miles, Eli said, "and getting colder." She considered this, then moved to the left side of the horse. Eli helped her up, his hands careful not to linger. She settled behind the saddle, the blanket pulled tight around her. As Eli swung up in front of her, Harlan called out, "You bring her back tomorrow. You hear, unless you want to buy out her whole debt. I could make you a deal." Eli touched his heels to the horse's flanks, and they moved off without acknowledgement. The woman didn't look back at the trading post, at the men still watching, at the chains lying abandoned by the water trough. She kept her eyes forward, one hand gripping the back of Eli's coat for balance. They rode in silence through the outskirts of town, past the shuttered shops and the saloon already glowing with lamplight. A few people on the boardwalk stopped to stare, but Eli kept the horse at a steady walk, neither hurrying nor slowing. Only when they'd left the last buildings behind and turned onto a narrow track leading into the hills did he speak. "There's a place about a mile up. Got 4 walls and a roof. Fire should still have some embers." The woman didn't respond, but he felt her grip on his coat relax slightly. "No one will bother you there." He continued, "Not tonight, not any night, if that's what you choose." "And what do you choose?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the wind. Eli guided the horse around a fallen log before answering, "I choose to see a person sitting by that trough, not property. Rest is up to you." The woman was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't speak again. Then, just as the small cabin came into view through the trees, she said, "I stopped believing in choices the day they put those chains on me." "Maybe," Eli said, dismounting and reaching up to help her down. "But you're still breathing, still standing. That sounds like choosing to me." She slid from the horse, stumbling slightly on numb feet. Eli steadied her with a hand on her elbow, then stepped back, giving her space. The cabin stood before them, rough-hewn logs, a stone chimney leaking a thin trail of smoke, a door that hung slightly crooked on its hinges. "It's not much," he said, pushing the door open. The woman stepped past him into the dimness beyond. "It's not a chain," she replied. "That makes it everything." The cabin held warmth like a cupped palm holds water carefully, imperfectly, but enough. Eli moved with practiced efficiency, stirring the embers in the stone fireplace until flames licked at the fresh logs, he added. Orange light pushed back the shadows, revealing a single room with sparse furnishings, a narrow bed against one wall, a table with 2 mismatched chairs, shelves holding tin plates and cups, a trunk in the corner. The woman stood just inside the door, still wrapped in the blanket, watching him work. Her eyes tracked his movements not with fear, but with the careful attention of someone who had learned to read men's intentions in their smallest gestures. "There's stew in that pot," Eli said without turning from the fire. "Made it this morning before I left. Should still be good." He ladled the thick liquid into a bowl, set it on the table with a spoon and a chunk of bread, then stepped back. The woman didn't move. "Go on," he said. "When's the last time you ate?" She couldn't remember. Yesterday. The day before, time had blurred into a series of cold hours by the trough. Slowly, she moved to the table and sat. The first spoonful burned her throat, but she didn't care. It was beef and potatoes. Simple fare, but it tasted like salvation. Eli busied himself at the other end of the cabin, pulling a shirt and wool trousers from the trunk. "These were my brother's," he said, placing them on the bed. "He was slight-built. They might fit well enough." He added thick socks and a pair of worn boots. "Better than what you got now." The woman paused in her eating. "Your brother died 2 winters back. Pneumonia." Eli's voice carried no invitation for sympathy. "Clothes don't do him any good now." She nodded and returned to the stew. When the bowl was empty, she looked up to find Eli seated in the other chair, a cup of coffee between his hands. He'd removed his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with premature gray and eyes the color of dried tobacco. "My name is Eli Cutter," he said. "I run cattle up near Devil's Creek, about 10 miles north. Got a small spread, nothing fancy. Few hundred head, couple of horses." He took a sip of coffee. "You can tell me your name or not. Makes no difference to how this night goes." The woman studied his face. She'd learned to recognize the signs, the hungry look, the false kindness that preceded violence, the smile that never reached the eyes. She found none of these in Eli Cutter, just tiredness and something else she couldn't name. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why what? Why pay for me? Why bring me here?" Her voice grew harder. "What is it you want?" Eli set down his cup. "You want the truth?" "I've had enough of lies." He nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Truth is, I don't know. Saw you there. Saw those men looking at you like you were horseflesh. And something in me just couldn't ride by." He met her gaze. "My mother sat in chains once. Different circumstances, but chains all the same. No one stood up for her. No one paid her way out. She died in those chains." The fire crackled. Outside, wind rattled the windows. "I don't want your pity," the woman said. "Good. I'm not offering it." Eli stood and moved to the fireplace, adding another log. "I'm offering a warm place to sleep and a door you can bar from the inside. Come morning, you can leave if you want. I'll give you money for the stage. Take you wherever you need to go. Or you can stay here a few days. Get your strength back. Figure out your next move. Your choice." "And if I choose to leave right now?" He gestured toward the door. "There's the door. Horse is in the lean-to out back if you need it. Though I'd recommend waiting for daylight. Wolves hunt these hills at night." The woman rose from the table, testing his words. She walked to the door, lifted the bar, opened it. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and snow. Eli didn't move, didn't speak. She stood there for a long moment, looking out at the darkness, then closed the door and replaced the bar. "The clothes," she said without turning. "I'll take them." "I'll step outside," Eli offered. "No need." Her voice was flat. "Privacy is a luxury I lost long ago." But Eli grabbed his coat anyway. "I need to check on the horse," he said, and left. When he returned 15 minutes later, she had changed. The shirt hung loose on her frame, the trousers cinched with a length of rope, but she looked more substantial somehow, more present. She'd washed her face and hands in the basin, revealing skin lighter than the dirt had suggested, and features that might have been called handsome rather than pretty strong jaw. Straight nose, direct gaze. "Thank you," she said. The words seemed to cost her something. Eli nodded and moved to the bed. Pulling off the top quilt, he arranged it on the floor near the fireplace with the practiced motions of a man used to making do. "What are you doing?" the woman asked. "Making my bed." "This is your cabin, your bed. And you're my guest." He stretched out on the quilt, boots still on. "Been sleeping on the ground for a week anyway. Moving cattle, this is luxury compared to that." She stood uncertainly, then moved to the bed. The mattress was straw-filled, covered with clean blankets that smelled of cedar. She sat on the edge, running her hand over the rough wool. "Cutter," she said suddenly. "You said your name is Cutter." "That's right. I knew a Cutter once. In Missouri, ran a feed store." "My uncle," Eli said. "Robert Cutter. I worked for him a few years before coming west." Small world. She lay down slowly, as if the bed might disappear. "He was a fair man, gave credit when folks needed it. Got him killed in the end," Eli said quietly. "Man couldn't pay his debt. Decided killing Uncle Robert was easier than settling up." The woman pulled the blankets up to her chin. "I'm sorry." "Was a long time ago." They lay in silence, the fire crackling between them. Outside, something howled wolf or wind. It was hard to tell. "I won't tell you my name," the woman said into the darkness. "Not yet, maybe not ever. Names have power, and I've given up enough power for one lifetime." "All right," Eli replied, "but I'll tell you this, I didn't ask to be put in chains. My husband, if you can call him that, lost me in a card game. Prescott, the man who won, said he'd take me as payment or burn our farm with me in it. My husband chose to live." "Where is he now?" "Don't know, don't care." More silence. The fire settled, sending up a shower of sparks. "Those men at the trading post," she continued. "They weren't the first, won't be the last, probably, but I'm still here, still breathing, like you said. Maybe that does mean something." Eli shifted on his makeshift bed. "Means everything, way I see it." "We'll see come morning," she said. "We'll see if your kindness lasts when the sun's up and the town's watching." "I don't much care what the town thinks. Every man cares what the town thinks. Just a matter of degree." Eli didn't argue. Minutes passed. The woman's breathing gradually deepened, evening out into sleep. But just before she drifted off completely, she spoke once more. "Cutter, if you try anything in the night, I'll kill you. Found a knife in your brother's things. It's under my pillow now." "Good," Eli said. "Keep it there. World's dangerous enough without giving up your defenses." She made a sound that might have been surprise or approval. Then sleep took her, and the cabin fell quiet, except for the fire's whisper and the wind's moan. Eli lay awake longer, staring at the ceiling beams. He thought about his mother, about chains and choices, about the weight of that leather pouch he'd left with Harlan. It was most of his savings, meant for buying more cattle come spring. But cattle could wait. Some things couldn't. When he finally slept, he dreamed of nothing at all, which was a kind of mercy. Dawn came gray and reluctant through the frosted windows. The woman woke to find the cabin empty, the fire rebuilt, and fresh water steaming in the kettle. Eli's makeshift bed had been folded and stacked neatly by the wall. Through the window, she could see him in the small corral, brushing down his horse with steady, methodical strokes. She rose slowly, muscles stiff from the first real sleep she'd had in days. The knife was still under the pillow where she'd placed it. She picked it up, studying the worn handle and well-kept blade, then slipped it into her boot. The morning air bit sharp when she stepped outside. Eli glanced up but didn't stop his work. "Coffee's ready," he said. "Biscuits in the pan if you're hungry." She stood on the small porch, arms wrapped around herself despite the warm coat she'd found hanging by the door, another of his brother's things. She guessed. "I should go," she said. Eli's hands never paused in their brushing. "All right, where to?" The question hung between them like morning mist. Where could a woman go with no money, no family, no name she was willing to claim? The trading post would have men looking for her. Prescott would want his property back. "West, maybe," she said finally. "California, Oregon, somewhere far. Stage comes through town twice a week, Tuesday and Friday. This is Wednesday." He moved to the horse's other side. "You could wait, or I could take you to the railroad in Cheyenne. 3 days' ride." "You'd do that." "Said I would." She watched him work, noting the care he took with the animal, the gentle way he spoke to it. "Why aren't you married?" The question surprised them both. Eli's hand stilled for a moment. "Was once, Sarah. She died birthing our daughter. Baby didn't make it either. I'm sorry. Was 7 years ago." He resumed brushing. "Figured I'd had my chance at happiness. Some men don't get even that much." The woman stepped off the porch, moving closer to the corral fence. "What was she like, Sarah?" A slight smile crossed Eli's weathered face. "Stubborn as a mule. Knew her own mind. First time I met her, she told me I was sitting my horse all wrong. Spent an hour teaching me proper posture while her father tried to sell me cattle." "Did you buy the cattle?" "Every head. Wasn't really listening to his prices, though. Too busy watching her." Despite herself, the woman felt her mouth twitch toward a smile. "Smart man. Lucky man. For a while." Eli led the horse to the water trough. "What about you? You married to the man who—" "No." The word came sharp. "Never married. He called me his wife when it suited him. Called me other things when it didn't. Law never came into it." "How long?" 3 years, maybe 4. Hard to keep track when all the days look the same." Eli secured the horse and came through the gate, closing it carefully behind him. They stood facing each other in the morning light, and she saw him clearly for the first time, the lines around his eyes, the scar through his left eyebrow, the steadiness in his gaze. "I should pay you back," she said. "For what you gave Harlan, I could work." "No." His voice was firm. "You don't owe me anything. That wasn't a purchase. It was—" He searched for words. "Call it a statement. About what I think of men who chain other people." "Noble words, but you're out your savings." "I'll make more. And if you can't, if your cattle die or the market turns, then I'll have bigger problems than money." He started toward the cabin. "Come on, breakfast is getting cold." She followed him inside, where he served up simple fare biscuits, salt pork, black coffee. They ate in companionable silence, the morning sun gradually warming the room. When they finished, she stood to clear the plates, moving with the automatic motions of someone used to keeping house. "You don't have to do that," Eli said. "I know." She pumped water into the basin, began washing. "But idle hands make me nervous. Always have." "What kind of work did you do before?" "Sewing, mostly. Took in mending. Made clothes for folks who could afford it. I was good at it. Had my own money for a while, before he found ways to take that, too." "There's need for seamstress work in town. Mrs. Holloway, who runs the general store. She's always complaining about having more orders than she can handle." The woman's hands stilled in the soapy water. "You think she'd hire someone like me, after where I've been?" "Don't see why she needs to know where you've been. Far as anyone asks. You're a widow from back east. Come west for a fresh start. Happens all the time." "And if someone recognizes me from the trading post?" "Then they'll have to explain what they were doing at the trading post." Eli's voice carried a hint of dry humor. Amazing how forgetful men can be when their reputations are at stake. She turned to face him. "It can't be that simple." "Nothing's simple, but it doesn't have to be as complicated as you're making it either." He stood, reaching for his coat. "I need to check my cattle, make sure they're wintering all right. You can come along if you want, or stay here. Your choice." That word again, choice. She dried her hands slowly, considering. "How far?" "Few miles up the creek, back by afternoon." "I'll come." The decision surprised her. "Been inside too long. Wouldn't mind seeing the sky." They saddled a second horse. A gentle mare, Eli said, had been Sarah's. The woman handled the animal with easy familiarity, adjusting the stirrups without asking for help. They rode north along a creek lined with cottonwoods, their bare branches scratching at the sky. Snow lay in patches where the sun hadn't reached, and ice crystals hung in the air like suspended stars. "Pretty country," she said after a while. "Gets prettier in spring. Whole valley turns green. Wildflowers everywhere. Sarah used to pick bouquets, fill the cabin with them. He pointed to a ridge ahead. Cattle are just beyond that rise, about 50 head. Rest are in the lower pasture closer to town. They found the cattle clustered near a bend in the creek where the water ran free of ice. Eli dismounted to check a few of the animals, running his hands along their sides, examining their eyes and hooves. The woman stayed mounted, watching him work. "They look healthy," she observed. "Been a mild winter so far. Lucky." He swung back into the saddle. "Lost near half my herd 2 years back when the blizzards came early. Almost broke me." "But you stayed." "Where else would I go this land? These animals. That cabin, it's all I've got left of the life I built with Sarah. Can't just walk away from that." They turned the horses back toward home. The sun climbed higher, warming their faces despite the cold air. A hawk circled overhead, riding the wind currents with effortless grace. "I had a place once," the woman said suddenly. "Nothing fancy, just a room above the milliner's shop where I worked. But it was mine. Had curtains I'd sewn myself. A rocking chair by the window. Used to sit there in the evenings, watching folks go by, planning the dress shop I'd open someday." "What happened?" "He happened, Samuel Morrison." The name came out like a bitter seed. "Charming when he wanted something. Mean as a snake when he didn't get it. Told me he loved me, needed me. Fool that I was. I believed him." "You weren't a fool. You were human." She gave him a sharp look. "That's a generous view." "It's an honest one. We all make choices based on what we know at the time. Can't judge yesterday's decisions by today's wisdom." They rode in silence for a stretch, following the creek's winding path. Finally, she spoke again. "You make it sound easy. Starting over." "Never said it was easy. Just said it was possible." As they approached the cabin, she noticed smoke rising from the chimney. "Did you bank the fire that well?" Eli frowned, urging his horse faster. As they rounded the last bend, they saw a wagon parked outside the cabin. A woman stood on the porch, middle-aged, wearing a practical brown dress and a no-nonsense expression. "Mrs. Holloway," Eli said under his breath. "The one I mentioned." "Eli Cutter," the woman called as they dismounted. "About time you showed up. I've been waiting near an hour." "Didn't know you were coming, Martha," Eli replied, helping the woman down from her horse. "Something wrong." Martha Holloway's sharp eyes took in the woman's appearance, the men's clothes, the careful distance she kept, the way her hand moved unconsciously toward her boot. "Heard you caused quite a stir at Harlan's yesterday," Martha said bluntly. "Whole town's talking." The woman stiffened, but Eli stepped forward. "Since when do you listen to town gossip?" "Since it might affect my business." Martha's gaze never left the woman. "You the one from the trading post?" "Yes." The woman lifted her chin. "I am." Martha studied her for a long moment. "Can you sew?" The unexpected question caught the woman off guard. Yes, I can sew." "Show me your hands." Slowly, the woman extended her hands. Martha took them, turning them over, examining the calluses, the straight fingers, the tiny scars from years of needle pricks. "These are working hands," Martha announced. "Seamstress hands, if I'm not mistaken." She released them. "I've got 3 wedding dresses, 2 Sunday suits, and a pile of mending taller than I am. My eyes aren't what they used to be, and my daughter just ran off with a traveling preacher. I need help." The woman blinked. "You're offering me work." "I'm offering you a chance. Room above the shop, meals, and fair wages for fair work. But I run a respectable establishment. No men visiting, no drinking, no causing scandals. You work hard, keep your nose clean, and what happened before stays before. Can you do that?" I don't even have proper clothes." "We'll take it out of your first week's wages." Martha turned to Eli. "You vouch for her." "I do. Good enough for me." Martha walked back to her wagon. Get your things. We're burning daylight. The woman stood frozen, looking between Martha and Eli. Just like that. Martha doesn't waste time, Eli said quietly. When she makes up her mind, best to move quick. But she doesn't know me. Doesn't even know my name. What's your name, girl? Martha called from the wagon. The woman hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. Clara. She glanced at Eli. Clara Freeman. Well, Clara Freeman, you coming or not? Clara looked at Eli one more time. Thank you, she said simply. No need. You'd have found your own way. Maybe, but you made it easier. She moved toward the cabin to gather the few things she'd used. As she disappeared inside, Martha climbed down from the wagon and approached Eli. Clara Freeman, she said quietly. Freeman seemed appropriate, Eli replied. Martha nodded slowly. That was a good thing you did. Eli Cutter, your Sarah would be proud. Just did what anyone should have done. But you're the only one who did. Martha patted his arm. You need any mending done. You know where to find us. Clara emerged with her old dress bundled under her arm. She paused at the doorway, looking back at the cabin that had sheltered her for one night, just one night that had changed everything. The knife, she said to Eli. Your brother's knife. Should I leave it? Keep it, he said. World's still dangerous. She nodded and walked to Martha's wagon. As she climbed up beside the older woman, she turned back once more. Will I see you again? Town's not that big. Eli answered. Expect we'll cross paths. Martha clicked her tongue at the horses, and the wagon rolled forward. Clara didn't wave goodbye that would have implied an ending, and this felt more like a beginning. But she watched Eli until the trees hid him from view. This quiet man who'd paid for her freedom and asked for nothing in return. 3 days passed before Clara saw Eli again. She'd settled into the small room above Martha's shop, a clean space with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking Main Street. Her fingers had remembered their skill quickly, flying over fabric with practiced ease. Martha, watching her work on a wedding dress, had nodded approvingly and said nothing more about wages being docked for clothes. It was Tuesday afternoon, cold rain spattering the windows. When the shop bell chimed, Clara looked up from her hemming to see Eli standing in the doorway, water dripping from his hat brim. Afternoon, Martha, he said, removing his hat. Miss Freeman? The formal address made Clara's chest tighten oddly. She nodded, returning to her work while Martha bustled forward. Eli Cutter, you're dripping all over my floor. What brings you to town in this weather? Supplies, he said, producing a worn shirt from under his coat. And this needs mending. Caught it on barbed wire. Martha examined the tear. Clara can handle this. Clara, take Mr. Cutter's shirt. Clara set aside the wedding dress and approached. When she took the shirt, their fingers brushed briefly. The fabric was still warm from his body. Big tear, she said, studying it with professional interest. But fixable. When do you need it? No rush. Whenever you have time. I can do it now. Won't take but 20 minutes. Martha had returned to her counter, but Clara could feel her watching as she led Eli to the small sitting area near the stove. He sat uncomfortably on the delicate chair, looking out of place among the bolts of fabric and dress forms. Clara threaded her needle and began working. The shop was quiet, except for the rain and the whisper of thread through fabric. She was acutely aware of his presence, the way he watched her hands move. You settling in all right? He asked after a moment. Yes, Martha's been kind. She's fair. That's better than kind sometimes. Clara tied off a section and started on another. I've been meaning to thank you properly for what you did. You already did. No, I mean really thank you. She kept her eyes on her work. I had a name before. You know, a real one. Eli shifted in his chair. Figured as much. Clara wasn't a lie. It's my given name. Clara May Jessup, from Virginia originally. The words came easier than she'd expected. Haven't used it in so long. It feels like someone else's name, someone who believed in things. Love, fair treatment, justice. And now? She considered the question, needle pausing. Now I believe in good thread and sharp needles, in Martha's honesty and regular meals, in small things I can count on. That's enough to start with. Clara resumed sewing, working in comfortable silence until the tear was nearly mended. Then, almost without thinking, she murmured, "My name is Clara." Eli's brow furrowed. "I know." "No, I mean," she set down the needle, meeting his eyes. "You said I breathe like someone who hasn't given up. First real compliment I'd had in years. Made me remember I had a name worth claiming." A slight smile creased his weathered face. "Glad to hear it." The bell chimed again. 3 women entered, shaking rain from their umbrellas, chattering about Sunday service plans. They fell silent seeing Eli. "Ladies," he greeted, standing. "Mr. Cutter," the eldest replied coolly. The others whispered behind their hands, glancing between Eli and Clara. Clara kept her expression neutral, focusing on the final stitches. She'd heard the whispers already, how Eli Cutter had bought a fallen woman, how he'd kept her in his cabin. The stories grew wilder with each telling. Martha had shut down such talk in her presence, but Clara knew it continued elsewhere. "Your shirt, Mr. Cutter," she said formally, holding it up. "Good as new." He took it, placing coins on the counter. "Much obliged, Miss Freeman." After he left, the women approached Martha with barely concealed curiosity. Clara excused herself to the back room, but their voices carried, "Is it true she's the one from Harlan's? Martha, how could you? A woman like that in a respectable shop." Martha's voice cut through like shears. "Clara Freeman is my employee. She does fine work and keeps to herself. Anyone who has a problem with that can take their business elsewhere." Silence. Then footsteps and the bell chiming as they left. Clara emerged to find Martha calmly sorting ribbons. "Thank you," Clara said softly. "Don't thank me. Just keep doing good work." Martha paused. That shirt could have waited a week. Eli knew that. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "He was being kind." "Maybe, or maybe he wanted to see how you were faring." Martha's eyes were knowing. "Either way, you handled it well. Kept proper distance. That's important, given the talk." "I understand." "Do you?" Martha set down the ribbons. "Eli Cutter's a good man, one of the best in this territory. But you're walking a narrow path right now. One false step, and those biddies will have you run out of town." "I know." Clara returned to the wedding dress. "I won't give them reason." But that evening, as she sat by her window watching the rain, she found herself thinking about Eli's smile, about the way he'd said her name Freeman like it belonged to her, about hands gentle with horses and hearts that recognized the still breathing. The next morning brought sun and a delivery of fabric from Cheyenne. Clara helped Martha sort the bolts, admiring the rich colors and textures. They were discussing which patterns would suit the new material when young Tom Porter burst through the door. "Mrs. Holloway, come quick. There's been an accident at the mill." Martha grabbed her medical supplies. She served as the town's unofficial nurse. "Who's hurt?" "Jake Morrison got his hand caught in the saw. And Mr. Cutter, he was trying to help, and..." Clara's scissors clattered to the floor. "Eli?" Beam fell on him. "Miss, they're bringing him to Doc Patterson's now." Martha was already at the door. "Clara, mind the shop." "But..." "Mind the shop." Martha's tone brooked no argument. Clara stood frozen as they rushed out. Through the window, she could see people gathering, could hear shouted instructions. Every instinct screamed at her to follow. But Martha was right. She had to be careful, had to maintain distance. She picked up her scissors, returned to her work, but her hands shook, and she had to rip out 2 seams, Customers came seeking news. She told them what little she knew, kept her voice steady, continued working. 2 hours passed. 3. Finally, Martha returned, looking tired. "How is he?" Clara asked before the door fully closed. "Jake lost 2 fingers. He'll live. Eli has a nasty gash on his shoulder and bruised ribs. Doc stitched him up." Relief made Clara's knees weak. "Thank God." Martha studied her shrewdly. "He asked after you." "He did. Said to tell you he'd likely need that shirt sooner than expected, seeing as how this one got ruined too." Martha's expression softened. "Clara, I know I said to keep distance, but the man did right by you. If you wanted to take him some soup, as a neighborly gesture, I wouldn't object." Clara hesitated. People would talk. People always talk. Question is whether you let talk rule your life. That evening, Clara walked the muddy road to Eli's cabin, a pot of beef soup wrapped in towels to keep warm. Her knock was answered slowly. "It's Clara," she called. The door opened. Eli stood there, shirt half buttoned over bandages, face pale but smiling. "Miss Freeman, this is unexpected." Martha sent soup. The lie came easily. "She said you were hurt." "Just a scratch." He stepped aside. "Come in." The cabin looked exactly as she remembered, except cleaner. The bed was made with military precision, dishes washed and stacked, as if he'd been expecting company, or as if keeping order helped manage pain. "You shouldn't be standing," Clara said, setting the soup on the table. "Doc Patterson must have given you orders." "Doc Patterson likes giving orders. Following them is optional." But he sat carefully, unable to hide a wince. Clara ladled soup into a bowl, trying not to notice how familiar the action felt. "What happened?" "Jake got careless. Happens when men work tired. I pulled him clear. But the saw kicked back, caught the support beam." He accepted the bowl gratefully. "Rather have a bruised shoulder than attend a funeral." Martha said he lost fingers. 2, but he's got 8 left in his life. That's what matters. Clara sat across from him, watching him eat. "Do you always put yourself at risk for others?" "Don't most folks." "No," she said quietly. "Most folks don't." He looked up at that, catching something in her tone. "I'm sorry. That was thoughtless." "True, though." She traced a pattern on the table's scarred surface. "I used to wonder why nobody helped, why they all just watched. Now I know. It's easier to watch." "Maybe. Or maybe they were scared. Fear makes cowards of us all sometimes." "Were you scared at Harlan's?" Eli set down his spoon. "Terrified." "Of what?" "Of making things worse. Of you thinking I was just another man wanting something." He paused. "Of riding away and wondering what happened to you." Clara stood abruptly, moving to the window. "I should go. It's getting dark." "Clara?" She stopped at the use of her first name. "I'm glad you came," he said simply. "Soup's good. Company's better." She turned back. "I made it. The soup. Martha didn't send it." "I know." "How?" "Martha makes terrible soup. Always too much salt." He smiled at her surprise. "Don't tell her I said that." Despite everything, Clara found herself smiling back. "Your secret's safe." She gathered the empty bowl, their fingers brushing as he handed it over. This time, neither pulled away quickly. "Your shirt," she said. "The one that got ruined today. Bring it by when you can. I'll fix it." "Or I could teach you to ride," he offered suddenly. "Proper-like. Sarah's mare needs exercise, and it's useful skill to have out here." Clara considered the dangers the talk it would generate, the assumptions people would make. Then she thought about walls closing in, about chains real and invisible, about breathing like someone who hadn't given up. "Sunday afternoon," she said. "After church, Martha closes the shop early." "I'll bring the horses." At the door, she paused. Eli, today, when I heard you were hurt, I realized something. What's that? I'm starting to believe in bigger things again. Dangerous, probably, but there it is. She left before he could respond, walking back through the gathering dusk, behind her. She knew he stood in the doorway, watching until she turned the corner, and for the first time in years, being watched felt like protection rather than possession. Word traveled fast in a town the size of Willow Springs. By the time Clara walked to church on Sunday, she could feel the weight of stares and hear the rustle of whispers behind gloved hands. She kept her chin high, her new dress a simple gray wool Martha had helped her make pressed and proper. "That's her," someone murmured as she passed. "The one from Harlan's. Living above the dress shop now, bold as brass. Heard Eli Cutter visits regular like." Clara slid into a back pew, focusing on the hymnal in her hands. The words blurred, but she wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her affected. Reverend Mills delivered his sermon on forgiveness and redemption, though his eyes seemed to avoid her corner of the church entirely. After the service, she was among the first to leave, stepping into the crisp afternoon air with relief. Martha emerged minutes later, lips pursed. "Vultures," the older woman muttered. "Every blessed one of them, as if they haven't all done things they'd rather forget." "It's all right," Clara said. "I expected it." "Doesn't make it right." Martha adjusted her bonnet. "You still planning on that ride with Eli?" "Yes." "Good. Let them have something real to gossip about." Martha's eyes glinted with unexpected mischief. "Though mind yourself, man's still healing." Clara was hanging her shawl in the shop when she heard horses outside. Through the window, she saw Eli dismounting, leading the gentle mare she'd ridden before. He moved carefully, favoring his injured shoulder, but his smile when he saw her was warm. She met him at the door. "You're early." "Wanted to beat the crowd. Half the town seems to find reasons to stroll past Martha's on Sunday afternoons." He handed her the mare's reins. "Remember what I taught you. Check the girth, adjust the stirrups, mount from the left." Clara ran her hand along the mare's neck. "She's beautiful. What's her name?" "Buttercup. Sarah named her for the color." He watched as Clara efficiently prepared to mount. "You've been practicing in your mind." "I've had little else to do in the evenings." She swung up smoothly, settling into the saddle with growing confidence. "Where are we going?" "Thought we'd follow the river trail. Flat ground. Nice views, unless you'd prefer to parade through town." "The river sounds perfect." They rode in companionable silence through the outskirts of town. A few people stopped to stare. Mrs. Garrison actually dropped her market basket, but Eli touched his hat brim politely and continued on. Clara kept her eyes forward, though she could feel the burn of judgment on her back. Once they reached the cottonwoods along the river, the tension eased from her shoulders. The trail was peaceful, with only the sound of water over stones and the occasional call of a hawk overhead. "You sit a horse well," Eli observed. "Natural balance." "I rode some as a girl. My father kept horses." The memory surfaced unexpectedly. He'd take me with him to check the tobacco fields. Said I had good hands. "Where was this?" "Albemarle County, Virginia. Beautiful country. Rolling hills, morning mist. Soil rich enough to grow anything." She guided Buttercup around a fallen log. "Haven't thought about it in years." "What happened to your family?" Clara was quiet for so long, Eli thought she wouldn't answer. "Finally, war happened. Farm burned. Father killed at Chancellorsville. Mother died of grief and pneumonia the following winter. I was 17, alone, with nothing but debt. That's when I learned to sew. Took any work I could find." "I'm sorry." It was a common story. Half the South had similar tales. She straightened in the saddle. "I headed west like so many others. Figured I'd find work in the territories. And I did, for a while." They reached a bend where the river widened, creating a small beach of smooth stones. Eli dismounted carefully, then helped Clara down. They led the horses to drink while they sat on a large boulder, watching the water flow.
"Tell me about Sarah,"
Clara said suddenly.
"Not about losing her, about having her."
Eli picked up a flat stone, skipping it across the water. She laughed at everything, found joy in the smallest things, first green shoots in spring, the way bread smells baking, how horses' ears twitch when they're curious. She made ordinary days feel like celebrations. She sounds wonderful. She was also stubborn, terrible at cooking, and couldn't carry a tune if her life depended on it. His smile was fond, but she tried anyway. Used to sing to the horses while she groomed them. They loved her despite the awful noise. Clara smiled at that. Did you know right away that she was the one? No. Took me 3 months to work up courage to court her proper. Her father thought I was slow in the head. He skipped another stone. What about you? Ever come close to marrying before? Once, a shopkeeper's son in Richmond, before the war. William Bennett. He was kind. Steady. Would have been a good life. She picked up her own stone, attempting to skip it. It sank immediately. But I wanted more than good. Wanted adventure, passion, something from those novels I used to read. So I said no. I regret it. Sometimes, especially when Samuel... She stopped, jaw tightening. You don't have to talk about him. No, I think I do. I think keeping it locked inside gives him power still. Clara took a breath. I met Samuel Morrison 3 years ago in Denver. He was handsome, charming, full of grand plans. Said he'd been cheated of an inheritance, needed just a little help getting back on his feet. I believed him. Gave him my savings, my trust, my... She threw another stone. Harder this time. Everything. Eli waited, letting her find the words. The charm disappeared once he had what he wanted. The grand plans turned into gambling schemes. When the money ran out, he found other uses for me. Entertainment for his friends. Collateral for his debts. When I tried to leave, he'd find me. Said I owed him for all he'd done for me. Her laugh was bitter. All he'd done.
"Clara, the last time I ran, I made it to Nebraska, got work in a boarding house, 6 months of peace. Then one night, there he was at dinner, told everyone I was his runaway wife, that I was touched in the head. Who would they believe, a charming man with money or a servant woman?" She stood abruptly. I went with him. What choice did I have? But this time, he didn't take chances. Sold me to Prescott to settle a poker debt. Said at least he'd get some value from me that way. Eli rose too, standing close but not touching. He had no right. No man has that right. Right doesn't matter when wrong has all the power. She turned to face him. That's why what you did. It wasn't just paying money. It was saying I had value beyond what men could take from me. You always had that value. I just reminded folks of it. Did you? Clara stepped closer. Or did you remind me? They stood there, the river murmuring between them, the space narrowing without either moving. Then Buttercup nickered impatiently, breaking the spell. We should head back, Clara said, though she made no move toward the horses. People will talk. They're already talking. This will make it worse. Do you care? She considered that. Less than I did this morning. That probably makes me foolish. Or brave. Eli caught her hand briefly, squeezed it. There's a difference between respectability and respect. You've earned the second. The first is just performance. They mounted up and started back, the afternoon sun slanting golden through the trees. As they neared town, Clara could see figures on the boardwalk, watching their approach. Next Sunday, Eli asked quietly, if you're willing to weather more scandal. Scandal's just another word for living life in view of small minds. They parted at Martha's shop, Clara handing back Buttercup's reins with reluctance. Several women stood across the street, making no effort to hide their observation. Thank you,
Clara said formally, loud enough to carry. "For the riding lesson, Mr. Cutter." "My pleasure, Miss Freeman. Same time next week." "I'd like that." Inside, Martha was arranging spools of thread with elaborate casualness. "Good ride." "Yes." "Learn anything useful?" Clara moved to the window, watching Eli lead the horses away. "I learned that respectability and respect aren't the same thing." "Eli tell you that?" "He reminded me of it." Martha joined her at the window. "That man's been alone too long. Nice to see him smile again." "We're just friends. Martha, that's all it can be." Martha's tone suggested vast skepticism. "Well, friend or not, he's good for you. You've got color in your cheeks for the first time since you arrived." That evening, Clara sat in her room, sewing by lamplight. But her mind kept drifting to the river, to stones skipping across water, to the brief, warm pressure of Eli's hand on hers. Dangerous thoughts for a woman in her position. But after years of careful numbness, even dangerous feelings were better than none at all. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Martha entered with a cup of tea and a knowing look. "Thought you might like some company," the older woman said, settling into the spare chair. "Gets lonely these Sunday evenings." "I'm used to lonely." "That's the problem. People get used to all sorts of things they shouldn't have to bear." Martha sipped her tea thoughtfully. "You know, I was married once. Hardly anyone remembers now." Clara looked up in surprise. Martha never spoke of personal matters. "Herbert Holloway. Good man. Terrible businessman. Lost everything in a bank failure, including his confidence. Took to drinking, then to worse. I left him." Martha's voice was matter-of-fact. "Scandal of the century in Kansas City. Respectable women didn't leave their husbands, no matter what." "What did you do?" "Came west, started over, built this shop from nothing. And you know what I learned." Martha met Clara's eyes. "The only person who needs to respect your choices is you. Everyone else can hang." Clara smiled despite herself. "Is that why you hired me?" "Partly. Also because you do fine work and don't chatter." Martha stood to leave, then paused. "Eli Cutter's the most decent man in this territory. If he's willing to brave the gossips for your company, maybe you should consider what that means." After Martha left, Clara returned to her sewing, but her stitches were uneven, her mind elsewhere, outside. The evening star appeared in the darkening sky. She thought of Sarah, who found joy in small things, of Eli, who saw value where others saw shame, of herself, slowly remembering what it felt like to choose. The week ahead would bring more whispers, more judgment, but it would also bring work she was proud of, conversations with Martha, and if she was brave enough, another Sunday ride. For now, that was enough, more than enough. It was a beginning. The blizzard struck without warning on a Thursday evening. Clara had just finished hemming Mrs. Patterson's church dress when the first winds rattled the shop windows. Within an hour, snow fell so thick she couldn't see across the street. "We'd best close early," Martha said, peering outside with concern. "This looks like a bad one." They secured the shutters and stoked the stove. Clara made tea while Martha checked their supplies, enough food for several days if needed. Wyoming storms could trap folks for a week. "I should check the horses at the stable," Clara said, remembering Buttercup and Eli's mount were boarded there when he came to town. "Tom Porter will see to them. You're not going out in this." Martha's tone brooked no argument. By nightfall, the wind howled like a living thing. Snow piled against the doors, and ice formed inside the window frames despite the stove's heat. They moved their chairs close to the fire, sewing by lamplight while the storm raged. "Listen," Martha said suddenly. Under the wind's shriek came another sound horses, struggling through the drifts, then pounding on the door downstairs. "Help, someone help," a man's voice, desperate. They rushed down, fighting to open the door against the wind. Tom Porter stumbled in,
covered in snow, supporting another figure. "It's Mr. Cutter," Tom gasped. "Found him on the road. His horse threw him." Eli was barely conscious. Snow crusted on his clothes, blood seeping through a tear in his coat. His shoulder, the same one injured at the mill, was twisted at an unnatural angle. "Get him upstairs," Martha commanded. "Clara, heat water. Tom, fetch Doc Patterson if you can." "Can't, ma'am, can't see 3 feet out there. Had to follow the buildings to find your door." They half-carried, half-dragged Eli up to the living quarters. Clara's heart hammered as they laid him on Martha's settee. His skin was ice-cold, his breathing shallow. Shoulders dislocated, Martha diagnosed, examining him with practiced hands. "And this gash needs cleaning. Tom, hold him steady." "Wait," Clara said. "Let me—" Tom's exhausted. She knelt beside Eli, bracing him as Martha prepared to reset the joint. His eyes fluttered open, focusing on her face with difficulty. "Clara," his voice was hoarse. "What are you doing here?" "Saving your stubborn hide, apparently." She tried for lightness, though her hands shook. "What were you thinking? Riding in this weather?" "Cattle. Had to move them to shelter. Couldn't leave them." "Hush now," Martha said. "This is going to hurt. Clara, hold tight." Clara gripped Eli's good shoulder and chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart through his wet shirt. Martha grasped the dislocated arm and, with one practiced motion, wrenched it back into place. Eli's body went rigid. A strangled sound escaped him. Then he went limp. Clara caught him as he slumped, cradling his head against her shoulder. "He's fainted," Martha said calmly. "Best thing for him. Now let's get these wet clothes off before he freezes." They worked efficiently, stripping away the sodden garments, wrapping him in blankets. Clara cleaned the gash on his shoulder, a reopening of the mill injury, while Martha prepared a poultice. Tom built up the fire until the room was stifling. "I should go," Tom said uncertainly. "This ain't proper, miss, you being here and all." "Propriety be hanged." Clara snapped. "Would you rather he died for the sake of gossip?" Martha smiled grimly. "The girl's got sense. Tom, you bed down in the shop. Can't send you back out in this." As Tom retreated downstairs, Eli stirred. His eyes opened, clearer now, taking in his surroundings with confusion. "Martha's place," he mumbled. "You nearly froze to death," Clara informed him, wringing out a cloth in warm water. "What possessed you to ride in a blizzard?" "Didn't start as a blizzard, just snow. Then," he tried to sit up, winced, fell back. "The cattle. I got most to the sheltered valley, but the cattle are smarter than you. They'll find their own shelter." Clara bathed his face gently, noting the fever already building. "You could have died." "Would have, probably, if Tom hadn't found me." His hand caught hers, holding it weakly. "You're trembling." "I'm angry," she said, though her voice cracked. "You have no right to be so careless. No right to—" She stopped, unable to finish. "To what?" His thumb stroked across her knuckles. "To make me care," she whispered. "I'd just learned not to. And then you—" "Clara," Martha's voice was gentle but firm. "He needs rest, and that fever's climbing." They spent the night fighting the fever. Eli drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid, sometimes rambling about cattle and Sarah and his brother. Clara stayed beside him, cooling his burning skin with damp cloths, spooning willow bark tea between his lips when he could swallow. "Shouldn't be here," he muttered during one lucid moment. "Reputation." "Shut up," Clara told him. "I've survived worse than gossip." "Stubborn woman. Now look who's talking." Toward dawn, the fever broke. Eli fell into a deep, natural sleep, his breathing evening out. Clara slumped in her chair, exhausted. Martha brought her coffee and a knowing look. "You can rest now. He'll be fine." "I couldn't bear it,"
Clara said softly. If something happened to him because of this fool notion that animals matter more than his own life. That fool notion is part of who he is. Man who doesn't care for creatures dependent on him isn't worth much. Martha studied Clara shrewdly. Question is, can you accept him as he is, or will you try to change him into something safer? Clara watched Eli sleep, noted the weathered lines of his face, the calluses on his hands, the scars that told of a life lived hard but honest. I don't want him safer. I just want him alive. Then you'd better get used to nights like this. Ranch life isn't for the faint-hearted. The implication hung in the air. Clara didn't deny it. By afternoon, the storm had blown itself out, leaving the town buried under 3 feet of snow. Doc Patterson finally made it through, pronouncing Eli lucky to have survived and prescribing rest. He can't be moved for days, the doctor told Martha. That shoulder needs immobilizing, and the fever could return. He'll stay here, Martha decided. We'll manage. The arrangement sent tongues wagging immediately. A single man convalescing in rooms where an unmarried woman lived. The scandal was delicious. Several righteous citizens made their opinions known. Clara faced them all with steady calm. Mr. Cutter nearly died bringing his cattle to safety. We're providing Christian charity. Nothing more. Anyone who sees evil in that has evil in their own heart. Mrs. Garrison huffed. Still, it doesn't look right. Neither does turning away a sick man in need. Which do you think the Lord would prefer? Eli woke properly that evening to find Clara reading beside his makeshift bed. She'd pulled her hair back severely, wore her most modest dress, but nothing could dim the concern in her eyes when she saw him watching. Water, she asked. He nodded, let her help him drink. How long? Since last night. The storm's passed. Your cattle are probably fine. Tom checked. And before you ask, yes, the whole town knows you're here, and yes, they're scandalized. I'm sorry, I've made things worse for you. Have you? Clara set down the glass. They already thought the worst. At least now I'm ruined for a good cause. Clara. No. She stood, busying herself with straightening blankets. You don't get to apologize for needing help. Not after everything you... Her voice caught. Not after watching you almost die. Eli caught her hand as she fussed with his pillow. Hey, I'm too tough to kill. Ask anyone. You're reckless. There's a difference. Maybe. But the cattle... I know. She sank back into the chair. Martha explained. They're your livelihood, your responsibility. I understand, but understanding doesn't make it easier when Tom carries you in half-frozen. They sat quietly for a moment. Outside, they could hear children playing in the snow, their laughter bright against the winter silence. I was riding back, Eli said eventually. After securing the herd, could have sheltered in the line shack, waited it out, but I wanted... He stopped. What? It's foolish. Tell me anyway. He met her eyes. I wanted to check on you. Make sure you and Martha had enough wood, enough food. Stupid, I know. You're perfectly capable. Eli Cutter. Clara's voice was strange. Are you telling me you nearly froze to death because you were worried about my firewood? When you put it that way, it sounds particularly stupid. She stared at him for a long moment. Then, before she could think better of it, she leaned down and kissed him. Not the careful, proper kiss of courtship, but something fierce and desperate and full of the fears she'd carried through the night. When she pulled back, Eli looked stunned. Clara, you impossible man, she said shakily. Don't you dare do that again. Promise me. I can't promise to stop being who I am. Then promise you'll try to be who you are more carefully. That I can do. He touched her face gently. Though you might have to remind me, frequently, maybe just like that. Footsteps on the stairs sent Clara back to her chair, cheeks burning. Martha appeared with soup and a knowing expression. Good, you're awake. Now eat this and rest, both of you. She fixed Clara with a stern look. "You've been up all night. To bed with you." Clara protested, but Martha was immovable. As she finally headed to her room, she heard Martha say quietly to Eli, "That girl sat with you all night. Wouldn't leave even when Tom offered to take a turn. You might think on what that means." Through the thin wall, Clara heard Eli's reply, "I've thought of little else. Martha, believe me." She fell asleep to the sound of their quiet voices, the crackle of the fire, and the steady drip of melting snow from the eaves. The storm had passed, leaving damage and beauty in equal measure. Tomorrow would bring consequences, questions, decisions. But for now, Eli was safe. He was alive, and she'd kissed him with all the fervor of her carefully guarded heart. Whatever came next, she couldn't regret that. 4 days passed before Eli was strong enough to return to his cabin. Clara helped him down the stairs, Martha fussing behind them with extra blankets and medicines. The town watched from windows and doorways as she assisted him to Tom's wagon. "Let them look," Eli said quietly, sensing her tension. "We've done nothing wrong." "I know, but knowing and feeling were different things." Back at the shop, Clara threw herself into work. Orders had piled up during the storm's aftermath, and she welcomed the distraction. Her fingers flew over fabric while her mind replayed moments Eli's fever-bright eyes, his hand in hers, that desperate kiss she couldn't take back. That evening, Martha cornered her over dinner. "You've been quiet." "I'm always quiet." "Different quiet, thinking quiet." Martha set down her fork. "He's a good man, Clara." "I know, but—" Clara pushed food around her plate. "But I'm not a good woman, not in the way that matters here. My past is past. Tell that to the town. Tell that to Prescott when he comes back to claim his property." Clara's voice turned bitter. "Tell that to Eli when he realizes what courting me would cost him. Seems to me Eli's already decided what you're worth." In a moment of kindness, but moments pass. Martha, reality stays. They finished dinner in silence. Clara retreated to her room, but sleep wouldn't come. She lit a lamp and tried to sew, but her hands wouldn't steady. Finally, she gave up and sat by the window, watching snow fall in the lamplight. A soft knock interrupted her brooding. "Clara," Martha's voice. "You have a visitor." Clara's heart leaped, then sank. At this hour, it couldn't be proper. She descended to find not Eli, but a woman waiting in the shop, young, pretty despite her worn clothes, holding a bundle. "Miss Freeman, I'm Amy Morrison. I know it's late, but I wondered, could you help me?" Morrison. The name hit Clara like cold water. "You're related to Samuel." "His cousin." Amy's face crumpled. "I'm sorry. I know what he did. The whole family knows. We're so ashamed." "What do you want?" Clara's voice came out harder than intended. Nothing. I'll pay. I need work done." Amy unwrapped the bundle, revealing a faded dress. "It was my mother's. I'm to be married next month, and I hoped, but if you'd rather not." Clara stared at the dress, then at the girl, barely 20, nervous, clearly gathering courage for this visit. "You came here at night because you didn't want to be seen asking me for help." Amy flushed. "No, well, yes, but not for the reason you think. My fiancé's family, they don't approve. They say I'm tainted by association. I didn't want them to know I was having Mother's dress remade. They expect me to buy new, to pretend I'm not who I am." Something in Clara softened. She knew about pretending, about the weight of family shame. "Let me see it properly." They spread the dress on the cutting table. It had been fine once blue silk with delicate lace. Now it was hopelessly outdated, stained, fraying at the seams. "I know it's beyond saving," Amy said miserably. "But it's all I have of her, and I thought—" "It's not beyond saving." Clara examined the fabric with professional eyes. "The silk's still good. We can take it apart, Recut it in a modern style. The lace can be cleaned and used for trim. It won't be the same dress, but it will still be your mother's silk." Really, hope bloomed on Amy's face.
"You could do that." "I can, but it will take time, and it won't be cheap. I have money saved, whatever it costs."
Amy hesitated. "Miss Freeman, I need to say what Samuel did was wrong. Evil. If I could undo it."
"You can't, neither can I."
Clara began taking measurements.
"But we can both decide not to let his actions define us. Hold still."
As she worked, Amy talked nervously about her fiancé, a farmer named George Talbot, about their small plans and large dreams. Clara found herself responding, offering advice about the dress, about marriage, about starting fresh.
"You're not what I expected,"
Amy said finally.
"What did you expect?"
"Someone bitter, broken, not someone who could be kind to a Morrison." Clara considered this.
"Bitterness is a luxury I can't afford.
It takes too much energy, and I need that energy for living." When Amy left an hour later, clutching her receipt and smiling, Clara stood in the empty shop feeling strangely lighter. She'd faced a Morrison and found not an enemy but a young woman struggling with her own burdens. The next morning brought another surprise. Eli stood at the shop door, still pale but steady on his feet.
"You should be resting,"
Clara scolded, even as her pulse quickened. "Been resting for days. Cattle don't feed themselves." He removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "I came to thank you for taking care of me. Martha did most of it." "Martha tells a different story." He met her eyes.
"Says you sat up all night. Says you wouldn't leave."
Clara busied herself with thread spools.
"You were fevered. Someone needed to watch."
"Clara." He waited until she looked at him. "We should talk about what happened. What we—" The shop bell chimed. Mrs. Patterson entered with her twin daughters, effectively ending any private conversation. But her greeting was warmer than usual, and she actually smiled at Clara.
"We heard how you and Martha cared for Mr. Cutter during the storm," she said. "Very Christian of you, despite the impropriety. The Reverend mentioned it specially in his prayers."
After she left, Clara and Eli stared at each other. "Did Mrs. Patterson just approve of me?" Clara asked faintly.
"Sounded like it. Martha must have worked some kind of magic."
"Or nearly dying in service to your cattle earned you enough sympathy to cover my sins by association."
"I'll try not to make a habit of it."
His expression grew serious.
"Clara, about that kiss. I'm not sorry," she said quickly. "I should be, but I'm not."
"Good, because I've been lying in bed for 4 days thinking about it." He stepped closer. "Thinking about you."
"Eli,
I know what people say. I know what they think. I don't care." He reached for her hand. "I've been dead inside for 7 years. Then you showed up, all fierce pride and hidden hurt, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to want something again." Clara's throat tightened.
I'm not Sarah. I can't be her. I don't want you to be. Sarah's gone, and I'll always love who she was. But you're here, and I—" He stopped, searching for words. "I'd like to court you proper, if you'll have me."
"The scandal will pass. Scandals always do, but regret that stays forever." Clara thought of Amy Morrison, remaking her mother's dress, of Martha, building a new life from ruins, of herself, learning to breathe again. "I don't know how to be courted proper," she admitted. "I only know how to survive. Then we'll figure it out together." Eli squeezed her hand gently. "Start with Sunday rides. Add in dinners when you're willing. See where it goes."
"And if it goes nowhere, if I can't—"
She gestured helplessly.
"If I'm too damaged for anything real—"
"You're not damaged. You're careful. There's a difference." He lifted her hand to his lips, kissed it softly. "I can work with careful." The bell chimed again. This time it was young Tom Porter, grinning widely. Morning. Miss Clara. Mr. Cutter. Fine day, isn't it? His eyes darted between them knowingly.
Ma sent me for her dress. Said to tell you she's recommending you to all her friends.
After he left with the package, Clara laughed shakily. The whole town will know by noon. Know what? That Eli Cutter was holding my hand in the shop at 10 in the morning. Good. Saves me the trouble of announcing it. But he released her hand, stepping back to a proper distance. Dinner on Saturday, Martha's welcome too, for propriety's sake.
She'll hate that. She despises chaperoning.
Then she can bring her mending and ignore us. He settled his hat. I should check those cattle. But Clara, thank you for saving my life. For that kiss. For considering this. Eli, she called as he reached the door. I'm considering saying yes. His smile transformed his weathered face. That's all I can ask. The rest of the day passed in a blur of customers and gossip. Word spread quickly Eli Cutter was courting the seamstress. Reactions ranged from disapproval to delight. But Clara found she truly didn't care. She was too busy planning what to wear Saturday, what to cook, what to say to this man who saw past her careful walls. That evening, as she worked on Amy Morrison's dress, transforming something old into something new, Clara thought about second chances, about silk that survived despite stains, about hearts that remembered how to hope despite hurt. She thought about Eli's words. I can work with careful. So could she. It seemed one stitch at a time, one dinner at a time, one breath at a time. The dress began to take shape under her hands, different from its original form, but beautiful in its own right. Like her life, perhaps. Like whatever she and Eli might build together from the remnants of their separate griefs. Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle this time. Clara smiled and kept sewing, humming softly, not quite a song, but close enough. For now, the morning started like any other. Clara was pressing a delicate christening gown when she heard the commotion outside. Horses, raised voices, the authoritative bark of someone used to being obeyed. Through the window, she saw him, Prescott, tall, well-dressed despite the trail dust, flanked by 2 hired men, her hands stilled on the fabric. Clara, Martha's voice from downstairs, tight with warning. She set down the iron carefully, checked that the knife was still in her boot, and descended. Prescott stood in the shop, hat in hand, smiling the cold smile she remembered too well. Miss Jessup, he said smoothly. Or should I say, Miss Freeman Clevername. I've been looking for you. I'm not hard to find, Clara replied, proud that her voice stayed steady. No, you've made quite a name for yourself. The seamstress who's caught Eli Cutter's eye. His smile widened. How enterprising. Martha stepped forward. State your business, Mr. Prescott, or leave. This is a respectable establishment. My business is with Miss Jessup. We have unfinished matters. He produced a leather wallet, extracting papers. A legally binding contract, signed and witnessed. That wasn't a contract, Clara said. That was trafficking in human souls. The law sees it differently. Debt transferred for considerations received. Your previous guardian was quite specific about the terms. He studied the papers with theatrical interest. You cost me considerable money when you disappeared. Then consider it a poor investment and move on. His eyes hardened. I think not. You see, I'm running for the Territorial Council now. Can't have loose ends or unpaid debts clouding my reputation. You'll come with me, quietly, or I'll have the sheriff enforce the contract. Like hell she will. Eli stood in the doorway, and Clara had never been happier to see anyone. He moved into the shop with a dangerous calm, positioning himself between her and Prescott. Mr. Cutter. Prescott's tone grew mocking. The knight errant. I heard you developed an attachment.
How much did she cost you at Harlan's? I might reimburse you, as a courtesy.
Get out, Eli said quietly.
I have legal papers.
You have nothing.
Wyoming territory doesn't recognize debt bondage.
Haven't for 2 years now.
Eli's hand rested casually near his hip, where Clara knew he carried a sidearm. Judge Carter made that clear in the Riverside case.
Prescott's face flushed.
The debt is real. Payment is owed.
Then take it up with the man who owes it. Miss Freeman bears no responsibility for another's gambling losses.
She was collateral.
She's a human being. Eli stepped closer. And you'll treat her as such, or we'll settle this outside the law's reach. The hired men shifted nervously. They'd clearly expected easier work than facing down Eli Cutter. Prescott folded the papers slowly. This isn't over. I have influence, connections, the election. Will be interesting. A new voice interrupted. Judge Carter himself entered the shop, followed by Reverend Mills and, surprisingly, Mrs. Patterson. I couldn't help overhearing your claim. Mr. Prescott, something about debt bondage.
Prescott's composure cracked slightly. Judge Carter, I didn't expect...
I was visiting Mrs. Holloway about a dress for my wife.
Imagine my concern when I heard someone claiming to own another person in my jurisdiction.
The judge's tone was mild, but his eyes were steel. Perhaps you'd like to present your case formally. In court, I'm sure the newspapers would find it illuminating.
Especially, Mrs. Patterson added sweetly, given your campaign promises about moral leadership and protecting the vulnerable.
Clara watched realization dawn on Prescott's face.
This wasn't random. These pillars of the community had been waiting, prepared.
There's been a misunderstanding, Prescott said stiffly.
I merely sought to collect a legitimate debt from Mr. Morrison. If he's transferred that obligation elsewhere...
He hasn't, Clara said, finding her voice.
Because people aren't property to be transferred. Whatever Samuel Morrison owed you, that's between you and him.
Well said. Judge Carter smiled approvingly.
I trust this matter is settled, or shall we convene court immediately?
Prescott's jaw worked. Finally, he jerked his head at his men. We're leaving.
At the door, he turned back. You've made a mistake, aligning yourself with her, Cutter. When I'm on the council,
you won't be.
This from Reverend Mills. I think the Christian Women's Temperance Union will be very interested to hear about your business practices. They've been looking for a cause to rally behind for the election. Prescott left without another word. The shop fell silent except for Clara's shaky breathing.
Sit down, dear, Mrs.
Patterson guided her to a chair. You've had a shock. I don't understand. Clara managed. Why did you all...
Martha sent word.
Judge Carter explained.
Said Prescott was in town asking questions. We've been watching for him. But I'm nobody. Why would you... You're not nobody.
Mrs. Patterson said firmly. You're the woman who cared for Eli during the storm, who mended my Sunday dress with such skill, who helped young Amy Morrison find hope despite her family's shame. That makes you somebody in our book. Clara looked at the assembled faces, judge, minister, society matron, all here to protect her. I don't know what to say.
Say you'll finish my wife's anniversary dress by Friday. Judge Carter smiled. She's counting on it. After they left, Clara stood stunned while Martha bustled about making tea. Eli hadn't moved from his protective position.
You knew Prescott was coming, Clara said.
Suspected. A man like that doesn't give up easy. He finally relaxed his stance.
Martha and I made some preparations. You organized the town leaders to protect me. I asked a few friends to be ready. They organized themselves. He crossed to her, taking her cold hands in his warm ones. This is your home now. Clara, we protect our own. The tears came then, sudden and unstoppable, not from fear or relief,
but from the overwhelming realization that she had a community, people who would stand for her, not because they had to, but because they chose to. Eli gathered her close, and she let herself be held, let herself feel safe. Martha discreetly retreated to the back room.
He'll try again,
Clara whispered against his shoulder. Maybe, but he'll find the same answer. You're not alone anymore. She pulled back to look at him.
When did you study territorial law?
A slight smile. Started the day after I brought you to the cabin. Figured it might come in handy. You've been preparing for this for weeks. Seemed wise. Man protects what matters to him. And I matter. You know you do. His thumb brushed away a tear. Question is, do I matter to you? Instead of answering with words, Clara kissed him. Not desperate like during the storm, but deliberate, certain, acclaiming as much as a gift. When they parted, Eli's eyes held a light she'd never seen before.
I should get back to work,
Clara said unsteadily. And I should check on those friends who happened to be passing by. But he didn't move. Clara, when this election's over, when Prescott's defeated and gone, I want to ask you something important. Her heart skipped. What kind of something? The kind that involves standing before Reverend Mills and making promises. He touched her cheek gently. But you've had enough shocks today. Just think about it. After he left, Clara stood in the quiet shop, mind reeling. In one morning, she'd faced her past, discovered her community, and received what amounted to a pre-proposal. Martha emerged with tea and a knowing look.
Eventful morning.
Did you know what Eli wants to ask? Suspected. Man doesn't organize half the town's defense without serious intentions. Martha handed her the cup. Question is, what do you want? Clara thought about chains and freedom, about breathing like someone who hadn't given up, about strong hands gentle with horses and hearts, about a man who studied law books to protect her in a community that rallied when she needed them. I want to stop running, she said softly.
I want to build something here with him.
Then I'd best start planning a wedding dress, Martha said practically. Something elegant but not too fancy, and we'll need to expand the living quarters. Can't have newlyweds living above the shop.
He hasn't actually asked yet,
Clara protested. He will. That man's been half in love with you since the day he saw you by that water trough. Just took him a while to admit it. That evening, Clara walked to the small cemetery at the edge of town. She found Sarah's grave easily well tended, with early spring flowers beginning to bloom. I hope you don't mind, she said quietly to the stone. I'm not trying to take your place, just hoping to make my own. He's a good man. You're Eli, the kind who deserves happiness again. I'll try to give him that, if he'll let me. The wind whispered through the grass, and for a moment, Clara felt a strange peace, as if something in the universe had shifted, making space for new love without diminishing the old. She walked back through town as evening fell. Several people nodded to her. Some even smiled. At the shop, warm light spilled from the windows. Home, she thought. The word felt foreign on her tongue, but right in her heart. Tomorrow, Prescott might try again. The election would bring challenges. There would be hard times ahead, there always were. But tonight, Clara Freeman, who had once been chained by a water trough, who had forgotten her own name in the darkness, stood free in the lamplight of a Wyoming evening, planning a future she'd never dared imagine. And that was miracle enough for any lifetime. The town hall had never seen such a crowd. Every chair was filled. People lined the walls, and more pressed against the windows outside. The air thick with tension and tobacco smoke as the emergency council meeting convened to address the matter of public morality and proper residency requirements. Clara sat in the third row, flanked by Martha and Mrs. Patterson. Eli stood against the side wall with the other men, his presence a steady anchor in the storm about to break. Judge Carter presided, though this wasn't a formal court proceeding yet. Prescott rose from the front row, immaculate in his city suit, holding papers like weapons. Gentlemen of the council, concerned citizens, we gather today to address a threat to our community's moral fabric.
Get on with it, Prescott,
called Jake Morrison from the back, the same Jake who'd lost fingers at the mill. We all know why you're here. Prescott's smile never wavered. Very well. I present evidence that one Clara Jessup, currently residing under the false name Freeman, is legally bound by contract as collateral for debts incurred by Samuel Morrison of Denver. Her presence here, unlawfully evading said obligations while corrupting an upstanding member of our community, threatens the very foundations of law and order we seek to establish.
That's a fancy way of saying you think you own her,
Judge Carter observed dryly.
I have documentation.
We've seen your papers. The judge continued. The question before this assembly is whether such documents have any standing in Wyoming territory.
The law is clear.
Indeed it is. A new voice from the doorway. Everyone turned as an elegantly dressed woman entered, followed by two men in legal attire. Perhaps I can clarify matters.
Clara gasped. She knew that face, though age had added lines and silver to the dark hair.
Mrs. Pemberton. The woman smiled warmly.
Hello, Clara, though it's Mrs.
Blackwood now. She addressed the assembly. Forgive my interruption. I'm Margaret Blackwood, attorney licensed in Colorado and Wyoming territories. I've come from Denver with information relevant to these proceedings. A woman lawyer, someone muttered.
Yes, shocking, isn't it,
Mrs. Blackwood's tone was amused. Almost as shocking as a man claiming to own a woman in 1887. May I present evidence? Judge Carter. The judge nodded, clearly intrigued. Prescott had gone pale. First, Mrs. Blackwood continued. I present affidavits from 6 women in Denver, all stating that Samuel Morrison attempted to use them as gambling collateral over the past 5 years. All refused. Clara Jessup was the only one without family protection to resist. She handed papers to the judge.
Second, I present Samuel Morrison himself.
The side door opened. A thin, nervous man was escorted in by a deputy. Clara's hands clenched in her lap. She hadn't seen Samuel in months, and the sight of him still made her stomach turn. Mr. Morrison. Mrs. Blackwood addressed him coolly. Do you recognize this woman? Samuel's eyes darted to Clara, then away.
Yes.
What is your relationship to her?
We lived together, for a time,
as husband and wife. No, that is, we never formally married. A murmur ran through the crowd. Prescott stood. This is irrelevant. Sit down, Mr. Prescott. Judge Carter ordered. Continue, Mrs. Blackwood.
Mr. Morrison, did you sign papers giving Miss Jessup to Mr. Prescott as payment for gambling debts?
Samuel squirmed. I was desperate. He said it was that or
what? Or he'd have me arrested for fraud. I'd used false collateral in our game.
Another murmur, louder this time. Mrs. Blackwood smiled like a cat with cream. So you committed fraud, then tried to cover it by illegally selling a woman who wasn't even your wife. I didn't sell her. It was a transfer of obligation. Of a debt she didn't incur, for a fraud she didn't commit, bound by a marriage that didn't exist. Mrs. Blackwood turned to the assembly. Gentlemen, ladies, I submit that no valid contract exists. Moreover, I present charges filed in Denver against Mr. Prescott for operating illegal gambling houses and practicing debt bondage. She produced more papers. He fled Denver ahead of arrest. His political aspirations here are merely an attempt to establish power in a new territory before the law catches up. Prescott shot to his feet. This is slander, I demand.
You demand nothing.
Judge Carter's voice cut through.
Sheriff Williams, I believe Denver wants a word with Mr.
Prescott. The sheriff stepped forward with shackles. James Prescott, you're under arrest on warrant from Denver. You'll be held pending extradition. Chaos erupted. Prescott tried to run but was quickly subdued. As the sheriff hauled him out, he screamed at Clara. You think you've won, you're nothing but a... Eli moved so fast, Clara almost missed it. His fist connected with Prescott's jaw, dropping him like a stone. Sorry, Sheriff, Eli said calmly. He was resisting. Sheriff Williams grinned.
So I saw. Need help getting him to the jail?
As they dragged the unconscious Prescott out, Judge Carter called for order. I believe this matter is resolved. Miss Freeman is exactly that, a free woman, legally residing in our territory. Any who disagree can take it up with the territorial court. Meeting adjourned. People surged forward, some to congratulate Clara, others to gossip about the drama. But Clara only had eyes for Mrs. Blackwood.
I can't believe you're here,
she said, clasping the woman's hands.
How did you know?
I've kept track of you since you worked in my household, Mrs. Blackwood admitted. When word reached Denver about Prescott's pursuit, I knew it was time to act. I couldn't help you then, my husband forbade it. But I'm a widow now, with my own law practice, and I owed you a debt. You owed me nothing. I was just a seamstress in your house. You were a young woman I watched suffer and couldn't help. That's haunted me. Mrs. Blackwood smiled. Besides, I couldn't miss the chance to see Prescott brought low. He's hurt too many women over the years. Martha pushed through the crowd.
You'll stay for dinner, Mrs.
Blackwood.
We have much to discuss.
As they made their way out, Eli appeared at Clara's side. You all right?
I'm free,
Clara said wonderingly.
Truly, legally free.
You always were. Now it's just official. He offered his arm. Walk with me. They slipped away from the crowd, walking toward the river where they'd had their first real conversation. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. I'm sorry I hit him, Eli said after a moment. Not very civilized.
I'm not. I wanted to hit him myself.
Clara stopped walking, turning to face him.
Eli,
what Mrs. Blackwood said about Samuel, about us not being married, does that change things? How you see me? The only thing that's changed is now I know you're even stronger than I thought. Living with someone who saw you as property. Fighting free of that. He touched her face gently. You're the bravest person I know. I don't feel brave. Brave people never do. He took a breath. Clara, I was going to wait. Court you proper through spring. Ask at summer's end. But after today, he dropped to one knee right there on the riverbank. Clara Freeman, will you marry me, not because you need protection, not because the town expects it, but because I love you and can't imagine facing another Wyoming winter without you beside me? Clara's vision blurred.
Eli, I know it's too soon. I know you just got free of one man and might not want...
Yes. He blinked. Yes. Yes. She tugged him to his feet.
Because I love you too. Because you saw me as a person when everyone else saw property. Because you make me want to be brave.
He kissed her then, there by the river with the sunset painting everything golden. When they finally parted, both were smiling. When? He asked. Soon, before Prescott finds a lawyer and tries something else. Tomorrow. Clara laughed.
Martha will kill us. She needs at least a week to make a proper dress.
A week, then. He took her hand, and they started back toward town. Where do you want to live? The cabin's small, but we could add on, or...
The cabin's perfect.
Where you brought me that first night, where everything started? She squeezed his hand. Where I learned to breathe again. As they reached Main Street, they found half the town waiting. News of the engagement had somehow already spread, Clara suspected Mrs. Patterson. Congratulations rang out, along with a few good-natured jibes about Eli's courtship methods. About time, Martha called. I've had her wedding dress half-planned for weeks. Mrs. Blackwood approached, smiling. I'll stay for the wedding, if you'll have me. It seems only fitting to see this story through to its happy ending.
I'd be honored,
Clara said, then more quietly.
Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Mrs. Blackwood replied, for showing me that courage can bloom even in the hardest ground. Your story inspired my own freedom. It's only right I help secure yours. That evening, the shop was full of women planning the wedding. Eli had been banished to the saloon where the men were toasting his upcoming nuptials. Clara sat in the middle of it all, still hardly believing the day's turns. From shackled property to free woman, from seamstress to bride-to-be, from alone to surrounded by friends who'd stood up for her when it mattered most.
You're awfully quiet, Martha observed, pinning fabric. Second thoughts. No, just thinking about circles, how I came here with nothing but chains and fear, and now...
She gestured at the warm, bustling room.
Now I have everything.
Not everything, Mrs. Patterson corrected. But you have enough, and with the right person, enough becomes abundance. Clara smiled, thinking of Eli's steady presence, his quiet strength, his fierce protection. Yes, she thought, more than enough. The week would pass quickly. There would be a wedding, a new life, challenges to face together. But tonight, surrounded by the cheerful chaos of women who'd claimed her as their own, Clara Freeman knew she was already home. Spring had come to Wyoming in earnest, painting the valleys green and dotting the meadows with wildflowers. Clara stood in the small room above Martha's shop, watching the sun rise through the window one last time. Today, everything would change. Hold still, Martha commanded, making final adjustments to the wedding dress. It was simple but elegant cream-colored wool with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Nothing like the elaborate gowns Clara had sewn for others. This one was hers, made with fabric Eli had quietly purchased weeks ago, just in case. Perfect, Mrs. Blackwood pronounced from her chair.
You look like yourself, only more so. Is that good?
Clara asked nervously. It's exactly right, Amy Morrison said from the doorway. She wore the remade blue silk dress, her own wedding just a week away. You look like a woman who knows her own mind. Through the window, Clara could see townspeople gathering at the church. More than she'd expected, word had spread that Clara Freeman and Eli Cutter were finally making it official. Some came from curiosity, others from genuine affection for the couple who'd weathered such storms.
Ready?
Martha asked gently. Clara took a breath, thinking of all that had led to this moment, the chains by the water trough, the silent ride through winter darkness, soup by firelight and lessons in breathing again, storms weathered and battles won.
Yes, she said, I'm ready.
The walk to the church felt both endless and too quick. Judge Carter waited at the door he'd insisted on giving her away, saying it was the least he could do after presiding over her legal freedom. The church was full, morning light streaming through windows to illuminate familiar faces. Mrs. Patterson dabbed her eyes. Sheriff Williams grinned broadly. Even Doc Patterson had cleaned up for the occasion. But Clara only had eyes for the man standing at the altar. Eli wore his best suit, the one she'd mended multiple times, and his face when he saw her made every hard moment worthwhile. Reverend Mills smiled as she approached, and Clara heard him murmur to Eli,
Breathe, son.
The ceremony was simple. They'd asked for traditional vows with one addition. When Reverend Mills reached to have and to hold, Eli added quietly, to respect and protect, but never to possess. Clara's voice was steady as she repeated her own vows, adding, to stand beside, never behind, to build together, not just follow. When Reverend Mills pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss was tender, a promise more than a claiming. The congregation erupted in cheers that probably reached the saloon. The reception was held in the churchyard, tables groaning under food contributed by what seemed like every woman in town. Clara changed into a practical traveling dress. They were spending their wedding night at the cabin. No fancy honeymoon needed or wanted. Mrs. Cutter, Eli said, testing the words as they prepared to leave. How does it feel?
Ask me tomorrow,
Clara replied.
Right now it feels like a dream.
Then let's go home before you wake up. They drove out in Eli's wagon. Wedding gifts piled in back quilts and preserves, tools and seedlings for a garden. The cabin looked different as they approached. Eli had added a proper porch, glass windows, even a swing. When did you do all this? Clara asked. Had help. Seems half the town decided we needed a proper home. He lifted her down from the wagon, holding her close for a moment. Welcome home, Mrs. Cutter. Inside, more surprises waited. New furniture, including a rocking chair by the fireplace, fresh curtains at the windows, a bookshelf with real books. On the table, a note from Martha. For your new life, don't come back to work for at least 3 days. Clara laughed, running her fingers over each gift. It's perfect. You sure it's not fancy? She silenced him with a kiss. It's ours. That makes it perfect. That evening, as they sat on the new porch watching the sun set behind the mountains, Clara felt a peace she'd never known before. Not the exhausted peace of survival, but the deep contentment of belonging. Any regrets? Eli asked, his arm around her shoulders. Only one, Clara admitted. I wish we'd met differently, that you could have courted me properly from the start, without all the pain between. But the pain led us here, Eli pointed out. Without it, I might still be that hollow man going through motions. You might never have left Virginia. We'd have missed each other entirely. When you put it that way. Clara leaned into his warmth. No regrets. A year later, Clara stood in her own shop on Main Street. Freeman's Fine Tailoring, the sign read, though everyone knew she was Mrs. Cutter now. Martha had helped set her up, saying it was time Clara had her own business. Through the window, she could see Eli talking with Jake Morrison, now her friend Amy's husband, about the upcoming cattle drive. Their own small herd had grown, the ranch prospering under their combined efforts. The shop bell chimed. A young woman entered, travel-worn and wary, clutching a worn carpet bag.
Are you Mrs. Cutter?
She asked hesitantly.
I heard that someone in Cheyenne said you might have work, that you don't ask too many questions about where folks come from.
Clara studied the girl, barely 20, bruises fading on her wrists, that too familiar look of someone running from something.
I might have work,
Clara said gently.
Can you sew?
Yes, ma'am, I'm good with a needle. Then sit down. Let's see what you can do. Clara pulled out fabric and thread. And while you work, I'll tell you about this town, about the people here who judge folks by their actions, not their past, about fresh starts and second chances. The girl's eyes filled with tears.
I don't have much money.
We'll work that out. First things first, you need a meal and a safe place to sleep. My friend Martha has a room. As Clara helped the girl, she thought about circles again. How helping hands reached out when you needed them most. How kindness rippled outward like stones in water. How breathing again wasn't just about surviving, it was about teaching others the same skill. That evening, she told Eli about the new girl. Another lost soul? He asked, but his tone was fond.
Another person who needs what I needed, what you gave me.
Clara nestled against him in their bed.
A chance.
The town's going to run out of room if you keep collecting strays. Then we'll build more rooms. She was serious. I've been thinking, that land adjacent to ours, what if we built a proper house, not just for us, but with rooms for women who need shelter while they find their feet? Eli considered this, like a boarding house, like a way station, between what was and what could be. Clara propped herself on an elbow, excited now. We could offer work at the ranch or in the shop, help them save money, learn skills, give them time to breathe. You want to create a refuge for women running from bad situations, Is that foolish? No. Eli pulled her close. It's exactly what I'd expect from the woman who taught me that breathing is an act of courage. Let's talk to Judge Carter tomorrow. See about that land. 5 years passed. The Cutter Ranch had grown to include not just cattle and horses, but a large house with 6 bedrooms, a thriving garden, and usually 3 or 4 women in residence, finding their way back to themselves. Clara's shop employed 2 seamstresses full-time, both former residents. On a warm spring morning, Clara knelt in the cemetery, placing fresh flowers on Sarah's grave as she did each year. "We had a daughter," she told the stone, "born last winter. We named her Sarah May. She has Eli's eyes and, Lord help us, my stubbornness. You would have loved her." She arranged the flowers carefully. "Thank you for loving him first, for making him the man who could see me by that water trough and know I was worth saving. I'll take care of them both, I promise." Standing, she saw Eli approaching with little Sarah in his arms. The baby reached for her mother with chubby hands, babbling happily. "She's hungry," Eli said, transferring the infant to Clara. "Takes after her mother always wanting something." "Wanting isn't bad," Clara replied, settling Sarah to nurse. "It's what we want that matters." They stood together in the peaceful cemetery, their daughter between them, surrounded by the life they'd built. The way station house was visible in the distance, smoke rising from the chimney where this week's resident, a young woman from Kansas, was learning to bake bread. "No new arrivals this week?" Eli asked. "Not yet, but Martha heard rumors of a situation in Laramie. We might have company soon." "We always have room," Eli said simply. That evening, Clara sat on the porch of the big house, watching the sun set while Sarah played at her feet. 3 women sat with her: the Kansas girl, a widow from Nebraska, and a young mother fleeing a harsh marriage. They were sewing, talking quietly about their plans, their hopes. "Is it hard?" the Kansas girl asked suddenly. "Being happy after being so sad?" Clara considered the question, thinking of chains and freedom, of breathing lessons and hands that helped without asking for return. "No," she said finally. "The hard part is believing you deserve to be happy. Once you believe that, the rest just takes practice." "Like breathing?" the widow asked with a small smile. She'd heard Clara's story. "Exactly like breathing, 1 breath at a time, until it becomes natural again." Later, after the women had retired and Sarah was asleep, Clara and Eli sat together on their porch swing, the stars bright overhead. "Do you ever think about that night?" Eli asked. "When I found you by the trough?" "Sometimes, but not with pain anymore. Just gratitude." "For what?" "For you seeing me, really seeing me. For this life we've built. For all the women who'll sit on this porch and learn to breathe again." She took his hand. "For second chances and stubborn cowboys who don't know when to mind their own business." Eli laughed. "Best business I ever minded." "The very best," Clara agreed. They swung gently in the evening breeze, the big house behind them glowing with lamplight, full of women discovering their worth. In the barn, horses nickered softly. From the garden came the scent of early roses, descendants of bushes Sarah had planted years ago. Clara Freeman Cutter, who had once sat in chains believing her life was over, closed her eyes and breathed deeply of the Wyoming night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new faces seeking shelter, new lives to help rebuild. But tonight, she was home. She was loved. She was free. And that was more than enough. It was everything. Thank you all for listening to this heartfelt journey through the Old West. I hope Clara and Eli's story touched your heart as much as it touched mine while sharing it. Where are you listening from? Please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and connect with fellow Western romance lovers from around the world. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850. Give this video a like. And don't forget to hit that hype button so more people can discover these tales of courage, redemption, and love in the American frontier. Until next time, partners.